There was a field where a castle had stood only moments before. No broken towers remained, no fallen gate, no stones scattered across the grass. The walls had not collapsed. They had simply vanished. A cold wind moved over the open land. It bent the grass in long silver waves and carried away the last trace of a voice that had spoken there. Thor stood in the emptiness. His hammer was in his hand. His knuckles were white around the handle. Behind him, Loki said nothing. Thjalfi said nothing. Roskva stood close to her brother and looked toward the place where the enormous hall had been. A moment earlier, there had been torches, benches, a roof so high that shadows gathered beneath it like clouds. A king had sat at the far end of the hall and watched Thor fail at one impossible challenge after another. A horn that would not empty, a cat that would not lift, an old woman who would not fall. Now there was nothing, only the field, only the wind, only Thor breathing hard, with his hammer raised against an enemy who was no longer there. Far away, 3 deep valleys cut across the side of a mountain. They had not been there before. Thor looked at them, then at the vanished castle. Then he heard the giant's voice again in memory. The horn was not only a horn. The cat was not only a cat. The old woman was not only an old woman. And you, Thor, you were stronger than you knew. The god of thunder did not move. For most of his life, strength had been an answer. When a gate would not open, strength opened it. When danger came near the worlds of gods and humans, strength stood between them and the dark. But here, on the far side of the world, Thor had found something no blow could strike. He had found a contest where force was real, and still not enough. And why did Thor stand on that empty field? To answer that, we must go back. Back before the castle vanished. Back before the horn touched his lips. Back before the cat arched beneath his hands. Back to a road leading east. Back to a morning when Thor still believed that whatever waited ahead would have a shape he could meet with his hammer. Back to the beginning. Thor was not a god who wondered for long. If a storm gathered, he walked into it. If something monstrous crossed from the wild places into the lands of gods or humans, Thor did not spend the evening discussing what it might mean. He rose, he took up Mjolnir, and he went. On the morning this story begins, the sky was bright and cold. Clouds moved over the fields. Beyond the last farms, beyond the dark line of forest, the road bent eastward toward country. Few travelers entered without reason. Thor had a reason. A name had reached Asgard. Utgarda-Loki. A ruler in the outer places. A giant, some said. A master of illusions, others whispered. A lord of a hall so strange that those who returned from it were never certain what they had seen. Thor did not care for stories that grew larger because no one had tested them. He preferred testing. So he harnessed his goats to the chariot. Tangrisnir and Tangenjoster stamped upon the road, their breath white in the morning air. Loki came with him. He fastened his cloak, looked east, and remained unusually quiet. Thor noticed. "You know the name," he said. "I know many names. This one?" Loki glanced toward the distant forest. "This one belongs to Trouble." Thor placed Mjolnir at his belt. "Then Trouble should be grateful we are coming." The goats leapt forward. The wheels struck stone, and the familiar lands slowly began to fall away. At first the road passed farms and low walls. Children stopped their work to watch the chariot. Dogs barked from doorways. By afternoon, the houses stood farther apart. Fences ended. Fields became rough grass. The road narrowed until it was little more than 2 dark tracks pressed into the earth. By evening, Thor and Loki saw a farmhouse standing alone beneath a hill. Smoke rose from its roof. A farmer welcomed them, though his family had little to offer. Thor provided the meal. He prepared his goats according to an old power known to him, then warned the household to place every bone carefully upon the skins. No bone was to be lost. No bone was to be broken. The family obeyed. Almost during the meal, the farmer's son, Thjalfi, split one bone for the marrow. The crack beside the fire was small enough that the boy hoped no one had heard, but some small sounds become very large by morning. Before dawn, Thor raised Mjolnir above the goatskins. The air tightened. The bones drew together. Flesh returned. The goats rose. For one moment, all was as it should have been. Then one animal staggered. Its hind leg bent beneath it. Thor looked down. The world became very quiet. When he entered the farmhouse, the fire had nearly gone out. The farmer woke first, then his wife, then the children. Thor stood in the doorway with the cold dawn behind him and Mjolnir in his hand. No one needed to ask what had happened. Thjalfi's face gave the answer. Thor's anger did not arrive loudly. That made it worse. His hand tightened around the hammer. The farmer fell to his knees. The family drew close together. Then Thor truly saw them. Not enemies, not giants, only frightened people in a poor house. His grip loosened. The anger remained, but it did not rule him. The debt must be paid, he said. The payment was not gold. Thjalfi and his sister Roskva would travel with him and serve in his household, and so the two children stepped away from the only home they had known. Not as heroes, not yet. Only as two young figures following a god into a world far larger than their own. Thor left the goats behind to heal. He took Mjolnir. He took Loki. He took the children. And together they walked toward Jotunheimr. The road did not remain a road for long. By midday, it became a path. By evening, the path became only the memory of a path. Dark trees gathered around them, roots moved beneath the snow. Mist lay low between the trunks. Thor walked first. Loki followed. Thjalfi hurried to prove useful. Roskva watched the forest as though it might speak if no one interrupted it. When darkness came, they searched for shelter. At last, they found an enormous opening among the trees. Inside was a smaller chamber, still large enough for all four travelers. Thor looked around. It will do. They settled inside. Then the ground moved. Dust fell from above. A deep rumbling passed through the night. Thor took Mjolnir in his hand. The sound came again. A rumble, a pause, another rumble. No one slept well. At dawn, gray light entered the opening. Thor stepped outside. The forest was pale with frost. Behind him lay the place where they had slept. Only then did they understand. It had not been a house. It had not been a hall. It had been a glove. A single glove. Its thumb had been the chamber where they spent the night. A short distance away, a giant slept beneath the trees. His breathing shook the branches. Each snore rolled through the forest like distant thunder. The giant opened his eyes and sat up. Snow fell from the branches above him. "My name is Skrymir," he said, "and you must be Thor." Thor lifted the hammer slightly. "You know me?" "I know of you." Skrymir reached for the glove and fastened it at his belt. The children stared. Even Loki had no answer ready. "You are heading east," said the giant. "I know the way for a time. Walk with me if you can keep pace." Thor did not like the final words, so they walked. Skrymir moved through the forest as easily as a man moving through tall grass. Where the traveler stepped over roots, he stepped over trees. Where they crossed streams, he crossed gullies. By sunset, Thor was breathing harder than he wished to show. Skrymir seemed untouched by the journey. He carried a large provision bag. When they stopped beneath an oak, he set it down. "Food is inside. Eat what you need." Then he lay beneath the tree and fell asleep. The snoring began almost at once. Thjalfi tried the knot on the bag. It did not move. Loki tried. His fingers found loops and turns, but no beginning. Thor took the bag. He pulled. The knot held. He planted one foot against the leather and pulled harder. Still nothing. The knot looked ordinary. That made it worse. Only a knot. A knot that would not open. Hunger became anger. Anger became action. Thor walked toward the sleeping giant with Mjolnir in his hand. He raised the hammer. Then he struck. The blow passed through the earth. Skrymir opened one eye. "Did a leaf fall on me?" He rubbed his forehead and returned to sleep. Thor stood over him in silence. He had struck mountains with less force. Later, he struck again. The ground jolted. Somewhere far away, stone cracked. Skrymir stirred. Was that an acorn? Then he slept again. Toward dawn, Thor rose a third time. He brought Mjolnir down with all the force he dared to spend. The oak shuddered. Snow leapt from every branch. A ridge in the distance gave a deep groan. Skrymir sat up. "Birds are careless this morning," he said. His expression was mild. Too mild. Soon he shouldered the provision bag and pointed east. "Follow that road and you will find Utgarda." Then he looked at Thor. "If you enter the hall, try not to boast too much." Thor stepped forward. Skrymir only smiled. Then he turned north and disappeared between the trees. For a while, Thor watched him go. The 3 blows remained in his hands. The knot remained closed, and the road east waited. By midday, the forest began to thin. The travelers climbed a low rise. Beyond it stood the castle, Utgarda. Its walls rose so high that the upper stones seemed to lean against the clouds. The gate was shut. Iron bars crossed it. Thor placed both hands upon the gate and pushed. It did not move. He pushed harder. The bars held. Near the ground, Thjalfi found a narrow space between them, small enough to be humiliating, large enough to pass through. One by one, they slipped inside. Thor went last. Beyond the gate lay a courtyard wide as a field. At its far side stood the great hall. They entered. Giants filled the room. Some sat along benches. Others leaned against pillars. They did not threaten the travelers. They simply watched. At the far end sat Utgarda-Loki. He was not the largest figure in the hall. He did not need to be. His power felt different, not like thunder, like mist, like a path that changes behind you once you have walked it. "So," he said, "you have arrived." Thor stepped forward. "I am Thor. So I have heard. And you are Utgarda-Loki. That is one name." His gaze passed over the travelers. No one remains in this hall unless he possesses some skill worth showing. Loki stepped forward first. "I can eat faster than anyone here." A long trough was brought and filled with meat. A figure named Logi sat at the opposite end. The contest began. Loki ate quickly. The meat vanished before him. But Logi consumed the meat, the bones, and even the wooden trough beneath them. Only scorched marks remained. Loki sat back. For once his mouth held no words. Then Thjalfi offered to race. A young figure named Hugi stood beside him. They ran. Thjalfi was fast, faster than most people who had ever crossed an open field. But Hugi reached the end before him. They raced again, then a third time. Each time Hugi was already waiting when Thjalfi arrived. The boy bent forward, breathless. The defeat hurt him somewhere deeper than his legs. Thor watched him. Then Utgarda-Loki turned toward the god of thunder. "And you?" Thor stepped forward. "At last. I will drink." A servant brought a drinking horn. It was large, but not impossibly large. Dark bands circled it. The rim was worn smooth. Utgarda-Loki spoke from the high seat. "A good drinker empties this horn in one draught." Thor raised an eyebrow. "And a poor one?" "2. And someone very weak?" "3. Thor lifted the horn. The liquid smelled faintly of salt. He placed the rim to his mouth and drank. The hall disappeared from his attention. There was only the horn, only its weight, only the cold liquid that seemed to continue without end. He drank until his chest ached, until his breath burned. Then he lowered it. A thin line had vanished from the drink. Only a little, a very little. The hall murmured. Thor lifted the horn again. This time he drank longer. His shoulders tightened, his grip hardened. At last he lowered it. More had vanished, but not enough, not nearly enough. Utgarda-Loki leaned forward. "You are not drinking as much as we expected." Thor looked into the horn. Something was wrong. He knew it. But knowing that something is wrong does not reveal where the wrongness begins. He drank a third time. He poured every part of himself into the effort. The hall grew silent. At last he stopped. The level had clearly fallen, yet the horn remained far from empty. The silence afterward was worse than laughter. Thor handed it back. "Perhaps," said Utgarda-Loki, "we should try something smaller." A gray cat padded into the hall. It moved between the benches as though the giants belonged to it. The animal stopped beside Thor and curved its back. "Lift my cat from the floor." Thor stared at Utgarda-Loki, then at the cat. "A cat. A cat." Thor placed both hands beneath it and lifted. The cat rose, or seemed to. Its back arched higher and higher. Its body stretched like a bridge. Yet its paws remained upon the floor. Thor planted his feet. The stones beneath him groaned. He lifted again. The cat's spine rose. Its head turned calmly toward him. One paw came free. Only one. Thor held it there. His arms shook. His breath shortened. At last, he released it. The cat landed softly and walked away. Thor watched it go. He had lifted boulders. He had broken gates. But he had not lifted a cat. His anger became cold. "Bring me someone to wrestle." Utgarda-Loki considered him. Then an old woman entered from a side passage. Her name was Elli. She wore plain gray wool. Her hair was thin and white. Her hands were narrow. She looked too frail for the hall, too old to stand before Thor. That was what made the insult burn. "You would have me wrestle her?" "If you wish to wrestle, yes." The old woman stepped into the open space. She did not bow. She did not tremble. She only waited. Thor approached carefully, not because he feared her, because he did not wish to crush her by accident. He reached for her arms. Her hands closed around him. Thor pushed. Elli did not move. He shifted his weight. She remained. He used more strength. The old woman bent with him, not away. With him, as though she understood the direction of his force before he did. The struggle changed. At first, Thor tried not to hurt her. Then he tried to move her. Then he tried to stop her from moving him. Wherever her fingers rested, heaviness entered. Not suddenly. Slowly, like tired joints, like a fire dimming after a long night. Thor pushed harder. The floor creaked. Elli leaned into him, small, unhurried, impossible. One of Thor's feet slid, then the other. He braced himself. The old woman's face did not change. Thor's knee bent. He fought it. The knee bent farther. At last, one knee touched the floor. Only one. But the hall saw it. The strongest of the gods knelt before an old woman. Utgarda-Loki rose. "That is enough." Elli released him. No one cheered. No one laughed. The hall seemed relieved. Food was offered. Lodging was given. But Thor had no appetite. That night he sat near a narrow opening in the guest chamber and looked at his hands. They were the same hands. Broad, scarred, strong. The same hands that had carried Mjolnir through battles no song could fully hold. Nothing had changed in them, and yet everything felt changed. He had failed to empty a horn, failed to lift a cat, fallen to one knee before an old woman. Each task had looked simple. That was the worst of it. No army, no mountain, no monster with teeth, a horn, a cat, an old woman. Perhaps the giants of the outer places were stronger. Perhaps Thor's name was smaller here than he had believed. The thought entered him like cold air beneath the door. Part of him wanted to return to the hall and make the matter simple. A blow can end an insult. A blow can prove what words have made uncertain. But he remembered the cat's calm eyes, the endless horn, Elli's light hands. He could not escape the feeling that he had spent the day striking at surfaces. The surface of a contest, the surface of a body, the surface of something that looked smaller than it was. Near dawn, Loki opened his eyes. "I know you are awake," Thor said. "I assumed you did. Something is hidden here." "Yes." "You noticed?" "I noticed enough to be uncomfortable." "And you said nothing?" Loki looked toward the sleeping children. Sometimes the thing spoken too early only gives anger a new direction. Thor watched him. "What were the contests?" Loki was quiet. "I do not know." That answer mattered. Loki could twist a truth until it wore another shape. But here, he truly did not know. Thor turned Mjolnir once in his hand. "Then we learn in the morning." Outside, gray light touched the upper stones of Utgardar. Morning came gently, too gently for a place like that. After the travelers ate, Utgarda-Loki led them through the courtyard and beyond the gate. The road west waited before them. At the edge of the field, the giant king stopped. "Tell me, Thor, how do you believe you fared in my hall?" Thor answered slowly. "Not well? That troubles you." "It does. Because you believe I will speak of it?" Thor's gaze hardened. "If you speak, speak truth." For the first time, respect entered Utgarda-Loki's face. "Very well." The air seemed to change. The moment before a hidden thing is named. The moment before a door opens inward. "You should know," said Utgarda-Loki, "that I would never have allowed you into my hall if I had understood how strong you truly were." Thor said nothing. "The giant you met in the forest was not only Skrymir." He touched his own chest. "That was me." Thor's hand moved toward Mjolnir. "You tried to strike me while I slept," the giant continued. "Each blow would have killed me if it had reached my head." He pointed toward a mountain, 3 valleys cut into its side. Long, fresh, deep enough that shadow remained inside them. "I placed the mountain between your hammer and me." Thor stared. The blows had not failed. They had been turned aside. "The provision bag was bound by enchantment," said Utgarda-Loki. "You were never meant to open it." Then he turned to Loki. "You ate against Logi." "The quiet one," Loki said. "Logi was fire." The answer settled over them. "You ate meat. Fire ate meat, bones and trough. Nothing consumes as fire consumes." Loki looked toward the empty field. His defeat had not become victory, but it had become understandable. Utgarda-Loki looked at Thjalfi. You raced Hugi. The boy lifted his head. Who was he? Thought. The wind moved through the grass. No foot outruns thought. Thought reaches the end before the body begins. Some of the shame loosened from Thjalfi's face. Then the giant king turned to Thor. The horn. Thor waited. One end of it was set in the sea. Thor remembered the cold taste, the salt, the impossible depth. You drank so much that the water itself fell. The shore will remember it. The sea will draw back, and the sea will return. Thor looked toward the unseen ocean. He had not emptied the horn, but he had moved the sea. The cat was not a cat, said Utgarda-Loki. Thor's grip tightened around Mjolnir. What was it? A serpent. The wind seemed to stop. A serpent so large that it lies around the world in the deepest sea. Thor remembered the arching back, the impossible weight, the single paw rising from the floor. I made it appear small, said the giant king, but when you lifted one paw, you raised the world-encircling serpent. Those watching were afraid. Thor had not lifted a cat. He had lifted something the world itself carried. And Elli? Thor asked. Utgarda-Loki's voice grew quieter. The old woman was old age. There was no trick in the answer. No mountain, no enchanted knot, only the thing itself. None can stand forever against her. Not men, not giants, not gods. If something lives long enough, Elli will bring it down. Thor remembered the heaviness entering his limbs, his knee touching stone. You fell only to one knee, said Utgarda-Loki. Now there was awe in his voice. That is more than any other has done. Thor stood very still. The anger did not leave him. It changed. The giant had deceived him. The entire journey had been shaped to make him measure himself against disguised things. Yet the truth had not made Thor smaller. It had made the world larger. He had struck mountains. He had lowered the sea. He had raised the serpent. He had stood against old age longer than any strength should stand. He had failed. And still, the failure was not what it seemed. Thor lifted Mjolnir. Utgarda-Loki stepped back. It is better for us both if we do not meet again. Thor swung. The hammer cut through air. The giant vanished. So did the gate. So did the walls. So did the hall. The castle disappeared without smoke, thunder, or ruin. Only the field remained. The same field where our story began. Grass bending in the wind, a road fading west. 3 impossible valleys in the mountain. Thor stood with the hammer raised. There was nothing left to strike. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Thjalfi stepped closer. Did we lose? Thor looked at the boy. The old answer would have been simple. Victory or defeat, strength or weakness, a blow landed or a blow missed. But the outer places did not care for simple answers. Loki looked toward the vanished castle. We survived the lesson, he said. Thor lowered the hammer. Roskva looked at the distant mountain. You made those valleys. Thor followed her gaze. The anger quieted a little. The valleys remained. So did the road. So did the sky. So did the memory of the horn, the cat, the old woman, and the voice that had named them. Strength had not been enough. That was true. But strength had still mattered. Without strength, the sea would not have moved. Without strength, the serpent would not have risen. Without strength, old age would have brought him lower than one knee. Thor turned west. The way home was long. The goats were waiting beyond the forest. The familiar lands still needed guarding. There would be other roads, other halls, other enemies. Some would have bodies. Some would have names. Some would look small and carry the weight of oceans. Thor began to walk, Loki followed, then Thjalfi, then Roskva. Behind them the field kept its silence. Above them clouds moved slowly across the pale sky. For the first time since entering Utgarda, Thor did not hurry. He listened to the wind. He watched the grass bend and rise. He felt the hammer at his side, still heavy, still faithful, still his. But now he knew something he had not known before. A hammer could break stone. It could split mountains. It could guard the roads between worlds. But not every trial was made of stone. Not every enemy waited in a body. Not every victory looked like standing over something fallen. Sometimes strength met something older than strength. Sometimes strength met something wider than strength. Sometimes strength did all that strength could do, and then had to learn what remained. Thor did not speak this aloud. He was not a god who explained himself often. He simply walked west beneath the open sky, and the road home waited beneath a quieter sky.